Over the last decade, the onset of plant-based meats onto grocery store shelves and restaurant menus has exploded. Some of the brands leading this category are Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, which offer vegan, plant-based ground beef, burger patties, and more. The science behind plant-based meat has come so far that it's sometimes difficult to taste a difference. The juicy flavor, look, texture, and aftertaste all mimic what consumers love most about meat, but without all of the cholesterol and saturated fats. Also, plant-based meats are better for the planet, requiring much less land and water to produce than traditional meat. Currently, 41% of U.S. land is used for animal pastures or feed production, according to the USDA. During the life cycle of a cow, 1,800 gallons of water are used to produce 1 pound of beef. That's equal to the amount of water one person drinks over 7 years. Despite the upsides of plant-based meat, there are still limitations, one being that a segment of people will always want the real thing. The question is, does it really matter if this meat is grown on a farm or in a lab?
I think that within a year, we'll see cell-cultured meat being sold in a restaurant somewhere in the world, either in the U.S. or perhaps even Singapore. In terms of mass market, that's still probably 3 or so years out. But it's closer than people, I think, generally expect, and that's because the science and technology is already there. The real barrier to entry into the market now are really the government regulatory bodies, the FDAs and the USDAs of the world, who need to give cell-cultured meat companies the green light to get out to market.
That's Chase Purdy, a journalist and the author of $1 Billion Burger, Inside Big Tech's Race for the Future of Food. He says the next big food revolution is cell-cultured, lab-grown meat. You might have heard of the technology several years back when the first cell-cultured beef patty was unveiled and received global attention and apprehension.
Back in 2013, when the world saw its first sort of cell-cultured beef patty, when it was introduced in London by Professor Mark Post of Maastricht University in the Netherlands, that cost about $1.2 million per pound. That has gone down significantly to around $1,000 and even less than $1,000 per pound. And you can imagine that once these companies start building their production facilities, that once those operations are up and running, the cost is going to decrease even further, even faster.
But what exactly is lab-grown meat made out of? The science behind it all is quite complex, but Purdy tries to simplify the process.
The first thing you need is an animal cell. So we'll do a pretty harmless biopsy on a beef cow and get cells from a beef cow. Then you need a nutrient-dense liquid medium, which is basically a liquid that's filled with like all the proteins and amino acids and nutrients that typically run through a bloodstream. And the third and final thing you need is a bioreactor, which is basically a big beer vat where you're able to sort of take the cells, stick them in the medium, and it has all the temperature controls and pH levels and oxygen levels that create the conditions for a cell to sort of happily replicate. And the cells basically grow into fat tissue and into muscle tissue, and you put those two things together and you have what is, on a molecular and a nutritional level, real meat.
But it all comes down to this one question. Does it taste like real meat? Purdy recounts his first encounter with this kind of meat. He tried some lab-grown foie gras, which is a French specialty made from fatty duck liver pâté.
I didn't grow up ever eating foie gras, and I don't really eat foie gras. It was an interesting experience. It did taste like a rich substance, but really it was everything that I ate after that experience that was what truly sort of impressed me, and that's chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, duck churro tacos, chicken salad, and all of these products were extremely convincing.
Purdy has tried several different versions of lab-grown meats, all crafted by different companies. When tasting cell-cultured beef or chicken, he looks for other markers aside from taste.
One of the things that I'm interested in doing is pulling it apart physically. And with a chicken tender, for instance, that I tried at a company Memphis Meats made, when you cut into a chicken breast, you see that it's like really stringy. it's really hard to get cells to grow in that sort of linear fashion. But at this particular instance, this company, I pulled apart the chicken tender, and it had that same texture as well as the taste. And I mean, it really truly was exactly like what you would expect.
The science that goes into perfecting lab-grown meat involves many variables and can take several years. San Francisco-based company Just Inc. is one American startup paving the way for mass-produced, plant-based, and lab-grown chicken products.
The Just Egg product that the company has is based off of mung beans. And one of the interesting things that all of these companies do, but Just in particular, is that they have like these systems for finding plant seeds around like the world and analyzing those seeds to figure out like what inside these plants allows the proteins to make animal products. So essentially they use mung bean to make their egg substitute, and they're using plants to figure out how to like pull out all the nutrients that are needed to put inside the liquid medium that cells feed on to grow into cell tissue, the muscle and fat tissue used to make cell-cultured meat.
Purdy points out that the research development of lab-grown meat extends past the U.S. Other hubs include the Netherlands and Israel, which are both pouring money into perfecting their own products. Purdy points out that many big producers are already backing these startups, hoping to get out ahead of the curve.
If you look back into the history of sort of like America's big food fights, you look at how the dairy industry, the butter people responded when margarine came over from France. When you look at how the milk industry responded to plant-based milks, it's always been very vicious food fights. The meat industry is more nuanced, which makes it interesting to me. You have a section of it, specifically the ranchers and some of like hog farmers, for instance, who are very against cell-cultured meat. But when you look at like the people who are making decisions in the boardrooms of Tyson and JBS and Cargill and these massive meat companies, in a lot of cases, they're sprinkling investment into cell-cultured meat companies. And that's because on a fundamental level, a lot of them are basically out saying that they're no longer meat companies, that they're protein companies.
While science can provide new alternatives, it's ultimately up to consumers to decide. If sales don't back the product, it's often on to the next invention. To find out more about this topic and our guest, Chase Purdy, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri and originally aired in July 2020. Our studio producer is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.